Today, what I wanted to go over is shoulder lateral raises, right? This motion here, this action, okay, whatever you want to call it, doing that at that joint. So there's a few things that I want to go over, okay, because a lot of people, when they think of doing a shoulder lateral raise, their focus is just right here. That's all they can see is just this, right? But I want to tell you something. It's not this that's what's important, and if it's working right or not. Okay, well, it needs to work. It needs to work right. It is important, but there's so much more. What I'm getting at is there's so much more going on to a lateral raise that you are not aware of, or that you're not, taking in consideration, which is the rest of your body. Okay, so anytime you're doing any sort of action like this, here, boom, like this, or like this, or like this, or like that, or whatever it is you're doing that involves, standing, it's the rest of your body is what the focus of the exercise is, right? If you're doing a seated lateral raise, then yes, the focus is here, like this, right? Okay, more maybe about this much of your body here, right? So not so much the legs, okay? More in the pelvis, right? If you're still seated, right? So when you're doing a seated shoulder lateral raise or anything seated, yes, there's less going on, okay? But you need to take in consideration that when you're doing a standing exercise, that is also a leg exercise, okay? It's not just a shoulder exercise or an arm exercise, or it's not just a shoulder overhead press, or it's not just a bicep curl. You are trying to get the body to use the legs with that movement as well, trying to get them to work and do their job, right? Which is stabilization and absorbing a lot of the impact and force from moving this weight around, right? And one thing too is I have here is a long PVC pipe, right? Because what I want to demonstrate too is the plane of which you are moving your hand through, or the object in your hand through, okay? It's a plane like so, okay? So if you can imagine, all right, if I grab a dumbbell, so I don't have a dumbbell, right? But a dumbbell is only, from here to here, right? Okay, and that's all you see as far as the plane goes. So it doesn't really it doesn't really have an effect on, when you're holding a dumbbell, it doesn't really work the plane in which you are moving the dumbbell through, right? Whether you're changing the plane or whether you're keeping the plane the same. And what I want to go over with the dumbbell lateral raise is keeping the dumbbell plane, which is the bar right here, okay, in this plane as you move your arm, okay? So you're not moving the plane around like this. You're not doing this with the dumbbell as you move it. You are keeping it completely straight, right? So now what we are working on is just the shoulder itself, because when you have this stuff going on here, if you're throwing this plane around, like that is hard to focus on my shoulder because my hand is doing so much work in my forearms, right? So when you think about doing a dumbbell lateral raise, this is a good tool to use to practice, okay? Is keeping your hand still from doing this here as we're trying to do this here, right? So what you can do is you can watch in the mirror and watch what this plane is doing. And if you're coming up and it's doing like this stuff here, then that's, we don't want to be doing that, okay? It's more efficient and taxes the delts more if we keep this plane here, right? You can still hold tight to the object that you're using, but when you're moving a dumbbell, you need to think about keeping the bar completely straight, like so. Okay, even when you're doing both sides, right? You want to keep this, try and match this bar, this plane, to the dumbbell as you come up. See, as I'm coming up, I'm kind of kicking it out a little bit on this side, like so. So I want to focus on keeping it underneath my elbow a little bit more. Boom. All right, so now what we have going on too is the legs, right, from here down, okay? So I just want to show you this here, right? So we have a lever here, right? So this is a lever here. The lever is going down this way here, right? Then we also have a lever here like so, okay? So now we have this lever here as we're doing this here, because as you move this lever here, this lever is going to want to move as well, which is your spine, okay? And the only lever that we want actually moving a certain degree is the humerus, the shoulder joint, and the arm lever, right? We want to keep this lever here completely stable, right? Because if this is happening here, you know, it's just not good, right? So we want to keep this lever in this plane right here, okay? But then also take in consideration that the shoulder joint is going to cross over, this shoulder here crosses over to these obliques here like so, right? So now as we're moving this here, we can kind of move the lever over to these obliques over here as we are moving the weight around, right? So then what happens when we connect the shoulders to the midsection, right? Then where does that line go from there? It goes down into the hip. So now we have this lever here, okay? Then we have this lever here, and then we have this lever here, all right? So you need to be aware of all three levers, right? And you need to be aware which one is doing most movement, okay? And you do not want your spine lever or your leg lever to be doing the most movement. You want your arm lever to be doing the most movement in a shoulder lateral raise, right? And one last tip for shoulder lateral raises, okay? I've been practicing them single arm lately. I really like that because it helps me kind of focus on one side at a time. Just think about like when you're doing like a single arm or a single leg exercise, you know, anything that involves one limb, you know, it's easier for you to comprehend, right? Think about trying to dribble 2 basketballs at once. You know, like when you're doing that, the motor mechanics, it's going to take some time to do, right? Like anyone can do these movements, right? But now when you start throwing objects into our hands and you start, you know, making us have to focus on different spots, that's when we start to lose it, right? So if you just focus on working on one side at a time, get good at each side, right? Get really good at doing each side by itself, you know, then you start adding them together. And once you kind of have that skill down, right, work one side at a time, right? But anyways, I want to move back to the shoulder lateral raise, okay? We're doing single arm, single leg, lateral raise. And remember, this is a dumbbell. I'm just using this long bar to point out to you where the plane is at as this is traveling through you know, its range of motion. So what I'm doing as I initiate movement here, I'm also, boom, locking into the floor. I'm creating torsion into the floor through my hip, okay? I'm pushing into the floor as I move this way. So as I, boom, right here, so it's, right? It's almost a simultaneous kind of motion. You know, the legs are not locked out and we're not stiff like a board. Our hips and our pelvis is relaxed, okay, and our pelvis is doing the work it's supposed to do. When we sit up nice and tall in a restricted state like this, then what can happen is certain muscles will work over others, right? So if we keep our hip in a nice, relaxed, kind of shocky, absorby state, now we're making sure that the muscles are firing as we're moving this weight around, right? So there we go, shoulder lateral raise. In the planes, push through the floor. Make sure you're keeping the dumbbell straight. And if you're doing a standing lateral raise, you know, it's a leg exercise. It's not just a shoulder exercise. It's getting you to understand and to feel your legs working while you do a dumbbell lateral raise. Thank you.